The first speaker of the day today is my old friend and colleague, Vinoo Mathur. I have known Vinoo since the days when we were probationary officers on the Western Railway zone of the Indian Railways. Vinoo, of course, has come a long way since then, and after a very successful career as a railwayman, he reached the peak as member traffic of the Indian Railway Board. He also held important positions like Secretary of the Railway Board and General Manager of the Northern Railway Zone of the Indian Railways. Today, he is the President of the Rail Enthusiast Society and also one of its founder members. Of course, Vinoo's claim to fame does not end with his railway career. Let me assure you, he is not an architect, he is not a civil engineer, yet his knowledge of the architecture of railway buildings is phenomenal. In fact, his knowledge of architecture, especially classical architecture, is more than phenomenal. So is his knowledge of rail bridges. While still in service, he published a very well-researched book, Bridges, Buildings and Black Beauties of Northern Railway. But his magnum opus has been the brilliantly written book, Indian Railway Buildings, Heritage, History and Beyond. This book was released only last year and is a must-read for anyone interested in the railways or anyone having an interest in architecture of colonial buildings. Because the railways were a very good exhibition of what colonial buildings were like during the days when the British were building buildings in India. Vinoo had occasion to visit Japan recently and made sure that he did not miss the excellent rail museums in that country. He will talk to you today of the JR East Museum at Omiya. Over to you, Vinoo.
Thank you, JL. And thank you for a very generous introduction. I had gone to Japan in 2017, and this was in connection with the high-speed rail, the Shinkansen type train that we are going to introduce between Mumbai and Ahmedabad. It was a trip primarily meant for familiarizing with the procedures and systems related to the Shinkansen. But I did make a request to JR East that I would like to spend a few hours in the museum, if it is possible. And they were very gracious and kind and organized a visit to the museum. And the visit was an eye-opener because it is exceptionally well run, very well managed. And I thought in this conference that we are having, if we leave out Japan, it would not be fair. Because whereas we associate rail enthusiasm and the love for the railways and the passion for the railways often with Britain and Germany and other countries, but we don't talk about Japan. Whereas there is a large number of rail enthusiasts, say, for example, in the United Kingdom. In Japan, virtually the whole country is passionate about railways. Very few people will believe that the largest number of passengers carried in the world are in Japan. They are not in India. Although passenger kilometers are much higher in India, but the number of people who actually travel on the railways is much higher, is higher in Japan. And everybody is very keen and passionate about the railway. So I thought a visit to their museum would be good, and having a small presentation on that would be useful. Let me mention that I went in 2017, but since 2017, a lot of developments have taken place in their museum, as I found out while going through their website. So I hope you will enjoy this. It's a new experience, and let me try and get my presentation out. Yeah, so this is about, yesterday, Mr. Stefano did mention a museum in Japan at Saitama. Saitama is the prefecture, and Omiya is the exact location where this museum is located. There are a number of museums in Japan. This is perhaps one of the best, and it is run by the JR East, Japan Railway East. Little bit about the Omiya Railway Museum. Its focus is basically on history and learning. Now, the learning component is important, whereas all museums focus on these two areas. Their learning focus is really remarkable and outstanding. And as we go through the presentation, I'll try and point it out. History includes exhibits of rolling stock and other equipment. They have a wonderful historical gallery. And there are new galleries that have been added over the last few years. And they trace the technological progress that has taken place in Japan since the first train ran in that country in 1872. The learning includes scientific principles applicable to the railway, the interaction between steel rail and steel wheel and so on, and interactive exhibition of exhibits for all ages. Learning takes place and it is applicable to all age groups, whether you're a child or a grown-up person. They have a wonderful library. They teach you about safety working practices in Japan. The Shinkansen has not had a single accident in virtually 59 years of its existence. Apart from this, the different viewing areas are in the museum include a rolling stock station, they call it a station, where you have locomotives, carriages, wagons, also a model railway. They have a history station where there is a large spread out area or panoramic view of how development has taken place in Japan. They talk about Japanese early history, how the railway age began, development of Japanese technology, the golden age of the railways, which was in the 40s and 50s, how Japan became a world leader, and so on, coming up to the present time. They have a science station, as I mentioned, where they teach you the fundamental principles of how railways are run, with steel wheel on steel rail, electric traction, how electric power is transferred into a AC or DC is transferred into a locomotive or a train, how safety is achieved through various signaling systems, and so on. They also have a job station, which I find very unique, and I don't think it exists in too many museums, where they teach the viewer, of the people, how they work in, whether it is train operation, in manufacture and maintenance of rolling stock, of track and station design, that is the construction and so on. Plus, they talk about how people work at stations. So it's a very comprehensive coverage of railways, particularly from a learning perspective. And then lastly, they have something called a future station, which really challenges your imagination. And you can sort of visualize and conceptualize how, society will change in the future, how technology will change in the future, and what kind of railway system can one anticipate or visualize that is going to come. So it's an interesting thinking process for the individual. There are other attractions. There is a railway. I mean, this perhaps did not exist when I visited, but now they have a railway cultural gallery, which talks about railways in literature, in pictures and paintings, railways, how it has affected food, in films and in music. Very interesting sort of impact of the railways on society. They have a archival gallery. They call it a collection gallery with archival material regarding documents, tickets, photos, tools, and so on. They have a large library, 36,000 books, magazines, timetables, and a separate library for kids. This is one of their finest interactive portions, interactive learning, where they have a large number of simulators. They have steam, they have electric, conventional electric, Shinkansen. They have simulators for a train conductor. And they also have these simulators in a sort of classroom-like arrangement where a large number of people can sit. Because this is a very popular, simulators are very popular, you need to book them advance. You can't go to the museum and just get it. So advance booking is required for many of these facilities. They also have a kids plaza, a Shinkansen lounge, and restaurants. So there are many aspects, many attractions in this particular museum, and we'll go through some of them. This is the entrance to the museum, and you can see the information center. A lot of information is available, a lot of leaflets, diagrams, and so on and so forth. We now come to the they call the rolling stock station, and the rolling stock station has both locomotives as well as carriages, and we'll look at some of them. Now, the locomotive that is displayed here on the left is called locomotive number 1 and belongs to 150 class. This is the first steam locomotive that ran in 1872 from a place called Shimbashi to Yokohama. It is a locomotive. There were 10 locomotives of this type that were imported. And they're all imported from Britain, manufactured by the Vulcan foundry. The locomotive on the right is called Benkai Go. There was a railway which was established in about 1880. This should read 1888. It's not 1888, it's 1880. And they imported 2 locomotives for that line from the USA. It was used for coal. It was also used on passenger traffic. They put in the Meiji dynasty, I think, had come in 1868, and they wanted to develop Hokkaido. Hokkaido is the northernmost island of Japan. And they brought in railways at the time. And this was one of the early locomotives. It's an American locomotive manufactured in Pittsburgh. It was a wood-burning locomotive. Therefore, you have this type of spark arrestor, funnel type of spark arrestor. They also have a very nice model of a steam locomotive. This is a mallet locomotive. Now, the unique aspect of the mallet locomotive, there were few that were imported in India also. It has 2 sets of driving wheels, 2 sets of pistons. The rear one is high pressure, the front one is low pressure. And for somebody who wants to learn about steam traction, it's a very good cutout model of a very unique type of locomotive. And they have very clearly displayed the superheater tubes, the superheater valve, so on and so forth. So an interesting display. This is another steam locomotive, which is C57 class, they call in Japanese this thing. And this particular locomotive was the last locomotive to haul in steam traction on the Japanese railway, because in 1975 they withdrew steam, and this was the last locomotive. In Japanese they call it kifujin. Kifujin means a noble woman, which really the flowing, the shape of the locomotive was compared with a lady with. It was manufactured continuously for 10 years in Japan and ran on all the main and regional lines. This is their main rolling stock hall, and in the center of it there is a turntable. And the turntable is they have it at nominated times. They make announcements, and In this case, it's an electric locomotive. In other cases, it's steam. They keep changing the locomotives, but it's a major attraction, and children in particular really enjoy the turntable, particularly in the style and manner in which it is done. And in the surrounding area, you can see there are a lot of other. They have 36, I think, locomotives all around this thing. What you see on the upper floor are displays which show the development of rolling stock in Japan over time, with models and sort of pictorial displays. It's a very interesting gallery. These are examples of two electric locomotives. The one on the left, it's called Class EF55, was introduced in the 1930s, and it hauled a lot of prestigious trains. What is unique is that at this early stage in the 1930s, they began to introduce the streamlined shape. Now, it was every time this locomotive changed direction, it had to be rotated because if you put a coach behind this, the gap between the driver's cab and the coach was quite large and looked ungainly. So it was flat on one side and had the streamlined shape on the other. The one locomotive on the right is what they called EF89 class, introduced in 1948. And the unique feature was, at this stage, they started introducing roller bearings. Then they have models of the Shinkansen. Shinkansen began in 1964. So it's getting on to 60 years. And this is the first series. It was called Zero Series, which was introduced between Tokyo and Nagoya and Osaka. And subsequently, there were other series that were introduced. For example, in this particular museum, there is a series 200, which is a sort of improved version of the same locomotive. Let's take a look at carriages. Now, this is a replica, not an original coach, a replica of an early third-class coach, which ran on that first line I talked about from Shimbashi to Yokohama. And its unique feature is the type of chairs inside and lighting. Lighting was not by gas, it was by simply putting a kerosene lamp through an opening in the top. So this person here is lowering a kerosene lamp for lighting the coach. These are again examples of some early coaches. The one on the right is a luxury coach, again on that Horonai Railway in Hokkaido. It had very plush seating arrangement inside, and externally it was also very decorative. So this is one of their sort of older and finer coaches. The name of the coach was Kaitakushi Go. And they have interesting names for different types of coaches and services. This is Hanifu 1 of the Kobu Railway, which introduced electric traction as early as 1904. This is a luxury train, often described as a traveling hotel. The coaches on this were sort of classified as 20 series cars. What they had, Japan is a small country. You can travel during the day, but they still had overnight services at that time. So this is a 3-tier coach on the right. The roof of the coach was actually rounded. It was basically rounded to accommodate the top berth. It had double glazed windows because it was air conditioned and had a power car attached to it. So these kinds of trains were introduced very early in Japan, and there are some very fine exhibits with mannequins inside. This again is another luxury train. It was called the Fuji Limited Express, which ran from Shimbatsu to Shimonoseki. Now, this was a coach which this train was really primarily to attract foreigners. So you could get European food inside. You again had luxury coaches. And at the end, you had an observation car. So what you are viewing is the observation car. And the observation car is beautiful inside because it has got this, what they call Momoyama style of decor, which is Japanese lacquer work, which you can see on the sides and on the top. So again, a luxury train, a fast train with outstanding facilities. And this train often linked with railway ferry service. Like in India, we also had between India and Sri Lanka. They had, these trains were linked to ferries going to Korea, and some of them via Korea or elsewhere to China. We are talking about an early period before the Second World War when these trains ran. The Fuji Express actually started very early in around 1912 or thereabouts, but was named the Fuji Express in 1929. This is the inside of the Shinkansen. I told you the Series 0 which you saw. This is what it looked like, and it is being preserved in a museum. This is what the washroom facilities were like. And lastly, let me show you, Japan is a fish-loving country. So for transportation of fish and to compete with sort of trucks, they introduced a super fast service with refrigerated vans. So this is an example of that refrigerated point. This also had a name, Renufu 1000 or something, and is well preserved. This was part of the van was a brake van. Now coming to another major attraction, this is an imperial train in which the emperor and empress traveled, and there are 6 or 7 coaches in the museum. This is a decorated locomotive. This emblem in the center is a cherry symbol, the symbol of the emperor. You see the Japanese flags. A little bit about this type of locomotive. It is called the C-51. It was again a very popular standard locomotive on the Japanese railways. And in 1919, when rail travel really started to grow in Japan, they increased the wheel diameter, and they also enlarged the boiler so that trains could run faster and you could haul heavier loads. These are the imperial coaches. These are exhibits, everything else is touch and feel. This is kept in a glassed partitioned area. You can't touch it or go near it. But there are beautiful coaches, very well preserved, and inside the sort of furnishings are very luxurious. And on the coach on the left, you can see the very nice painting motifs along the roof line. We now come to another portion, which is again a unique. I don't know how many museums have this. This is called diorama, which is a very massive model rail system, and it is the largest system in Japan on the HO gauge. It has a track length of 1200 meters, and they have 1400 cars. Just a glimpse of it. On the left, you can see the scale of this model rail system. It is 25 meters or 23 meters by 10 meters. And it has all kinds of urban areas, scenery, rural areas, and so on. On the right, what you see is the control panel, and you can see behind that there is a sitting area. So visitors come, sit, and they do a show, and you can watch that show for quite some time. This is to give you some idea of the scale of the railway stations itself. So there are some small station on the right, a large station on the left with models of different categories of trains which are displayed. And as I told you, this is the HO gauge, and you can see, compare it with that particular individual, you can see on the left. So you get a sense of proportion. They also cover a wide range of coaching stock which are currently in use in Japan. On the right, you have something called the E5 Shinkansen. This is the kind of model that India is going to get eventually. And this is a suburban service on the left. There are a number of model locomotives, and on the right you can see a freight yard with containers lying on the platform and a shed beyond. So it's a very comprehensive, very attractive diorama. Another major attraction in the museum is are the simulators, and they have a large number of simulators. Of course, the finest one I found was the steam locomotive simulator. And when I finished my presentation, there's a 1-minute clip of what it actually feels like when it is running. So it's very natural scenery outside, and it rattles. You can hear the whistle, and so on and so forth. This is another type of simulator. On the left is an electric locomotive where you see a grandson and grandfather trying to drive that simulator. On the right, you have another high-speed simulator. They have subsequently introduced a Shinkansen E5 simulator. And as I mentioned earlier, they also have a classroom arrangement where in that classroom you have a very large number of large computer type screens in which you can run trains. So it's a very popular attraction, the simulators, in this particular museum. This is the sort of view that a driver gets from this simulator. It is very, very natural, and you do get the feel of driving a rail train. This is going through a sort of urban area or a station area. I now come to an area that they have a large, what they call a kids plaza or children's plaza, where very young children, I mean children of all ages, can learn. So they have an area for toddlers. So parents with their small kids come and play around with, plastic track and assemble railway lines. They have these drawers in which all kind of equipment is there. And what this photo really displays is how engrossed a child can get in this. So the love for trains in Japan comes at a very, very young age. And it is this kind of thing that really motivates young people to develop an interest in railways. Some of them may join the railways, but they have a permanent love for the railways. They also have a toy train, which you can see on the left. This toy train is modeled on the E2 1000 series. They also now have another toy train, which is modeled on the E5 Shinkansen, the type India will get, the green colored one I had shown. This is a touch and feel model you see on the right bottom. of, again, a Shinkansen, which children can enjoy. And what I'm showing you on the right, this is a stall where you can buy snacks and lunch. And the boxes of lunch that they buy, they can then go into this coach which is standing behind this toy train, sit and relax there, have their lunch. And what you have on the other side of that coach or that train is actually the main line running. And on the main line, there are Shinkansens coming once in a while. And while you're having lunch, you can have the joy of seeing high-speed trains running on the adjacent line. So it's an interesting feature. And they have a lot of eating places. They have a full restaurant. They have a separate restaurant for children. So it's very attractive. This is something called a miniature driving train park. It's a 300 meter track, and children above a particular age, you should have passed a particular educational qualification, and they can drive these. You get the feel of track, you get the feel of points, you get the feel of signaling. So it's a tremendous learning experience for a young person. And they have these stations here you see on the left where you can board and get off the train. I mean, something like this, I don't know how many museums have, where you get this self-driving experience on this miniature rolling stock. And lastly, I come to this, this is the souvenir shop. So you have a large variety of items that you can buy for souvenirs or toys for your children and so on. So to my mind, this was a very interesting experience and also a very great learning experience. So it's a very fine museum. The museum has a relationship with what they call with the York Museum in London. They have some kind of a MOU or something of knowledge sharing and so on. I will now request Apurva to play that steam.
Yes, sir.
Can you just play that?
Yes, sir.
So this is a 1 minute long thing of what it feels like being on that steam simulator.
Now?
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, so I think this is probably the only steam simulator in the world. I'm not sure that I could be wrong, but this is perhaps one of the very few steam simulators that exist anywhere in the world. I think I'll stop there, and if there are any questions or queries, I will try and answer, although I am no expert on the museum, but it was a very enjoyable visit.
Thank you very much, Vinoo. Excellent talk. Very good overview of the JR East Museum. There are no specific questions, but there were a large number of comments all positive. In fact, a number of people have thanked you for a very good talk and a very good, not only of the museum, but love of trains that are there in Japan. One question has just come in. Apur Bahadur is asking, how is the museum funded?
Oh, the Japan, I'm sure. I don't know the correct answer, but anything that you do in Japan, is funded by itself. So if you see the kind of facilities they have, the ticketing procedures that they have, to a great extent, this is run by a society. I think museums are run there by some kind of a society. So to a great extent, I think it would be self-supporting, but I'm sure JR East would be putting in some support also.
Thank you, Vinoo.
Because if you see, there are restaurants, there are these outlets, commercial outlets, there are tickets, there is booking for the simulators and all. So to a great extent or to a certain extent, it must be self-supporting.
Thank you, Vinoo. Before we go to the next talk, since we have a little time, I would like to invite Vikas Singh to tell us about the quiz that we had instituted. Vikas Singh?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay.
So I'll just share and I'll take through this thing. Okay, the screen is visible, sir?
Yeah, it is.
Go ahead, go ahead.
So we had this third annual RES quiz and we had 20 questions. We had 21 participants. The first question, we had some very easy questions and then some tough questions. The first was, where is Britain's National Rail Museum located? York, and 18 people got it right. The second was, which terminus in Punjab sees passenger trains for a few days in a year? The answer is Husainiwala, and 9 people got it right. The third was a steam loco of the former the fourth was, which class of steam loco is associated with the Bihta disaster of 1937? The answer is XB class. 8 people got it correct. The fifth was, where was the headquarters of the Assam Bengal Railway? Chittagong. 15 people got it correct. What was Vishakhapatnam station called until the 1970s? Voltaire. Everybody got it correct. What was Banaras station called until recently? Mandua D. 19 got it correct. Now, which station on Darjeeling line has a railway museum? Whom? 19 got it correct. Now, worldwide, which was the widest gauge used in a major railway system? It's 7 feet. We also accepted, in a few places where you have 7 feet 1/4 inches and 7 feet 6 inches. 5 people got it correct. What was unusual about the Kanpur-Lucknow section until the 1990s? There was a BG line and a MG line running parallel. We also gave full marks to people who just said dual gauge. 7 got it correct. Where is the workshop for steam locos on the Darjeeling line? Tendharia. Everybody got it right. Which British businessman is associated with the creation of the National Rail Museum in Delhi? 17 got it right. Michael Sato. Now, this was something nobody could get it correct. On which railway system was Bhavani Junction situated? Now, you need to really have read the book to get it correct. It's the Delhi Deccan Railway, fictional. Nobody could get it right. Which station played the role of Bhavani Junction in the Hollywood film of that name? Lahore, 14 got it correct. Which European countries use the 5 feet 6 inch gauge? We were looking for 2 countries, but whoever could get even 1 country correct, we gave full marks. It's Spain and Portugal. 9 got it correct. Which Indian Nobel laureate was born in Lahore as his father worked in the railways there? It's Subramaniam Chandrasekhar. 13 got it correct. Which station was the main railhead for Jammu and Kashmir until the early 1970s? It's Pathankot. 7 got it correct. Gondia and Jalna stations are both in Maharashtra. What is unusual about these stations? Both the stations have single letters code, G for Gondia and J for Jalna. 15 got it correct. Ledo is the easternmost railway station in India. Which close station lies further east? Sanjay also talked about this station yesterday in his presentation. It's Lekhapani. 19 got it correct. The last question, nobody could get it correct. Which junction in Rajasthan has seen a 2 feet narrow gauge, a meter gauge, and a broad gauge? The answer is Peeper Road. It's the branch to Bilara. Nobody could get it correct. Now, before we announce the winners, the top 3 got 16 correct. This entire quiz was put together by Ajay Banerjee, who is the first Indian to win the BBC Mastermind. He won it in 1998. Now, there is a bit of trivia. Both the first and the second season were won by Bengalis, and both of them were from Dehradun. I mean, he was a mathematics teacher, Ajay, at Doon School, and the second year the prize was again won by a teacher from Wellams. So Ajay helped put this quiz together. The top 3 winners who got 16 answers correct. There is Sagar Tipnis, Ashad Siddiqui, and I think the last one is Harshvardhan. So all the winners will be getting complimentary 1-year membership to the RES Society. We will be again sharing, all the answers on the RES WhatsApp group.
If you are already a member of the society, you can gift the membership to any other person of your choice.
Yeah, so I think, sir, we can go to the next.
Yeah.